It's Cardboard Time, episode number 98, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, we have reviews of Eila and Something Shiny, River Valley Glassworks, and an interview with Chris Westmus. This is being recorded a little bit earlier than normal. My birthday is coming up on Sunday, which will have already passed by the time that you hear this. But I am heading up to Buffalo. I have a couple of birthday activities planned, so I wanted to make sure that this got done and uploaded before I headed back to the Great White North and my hometown. So yeah, this is the early recording for you, and let's go ahead and dive into it. The shelf of aspiration is down by 1. It is at 124. I did play one game, that being Cyber Pet Quest. I do want to do a review of it, but I want to make sure that I finish the content before doing that. I'm about a third of the way through so far and enjoying it, but want to make sure that I get the full experience before I go ahead and talk about it. So let's get into the two reviews because I do want to get into this interview. I think you're going to really enjoy it today. Chris was a delight to talk to. But let's talk about Eila and Something Shiny. This is a one-player game, which is really kind of 1+. You can make joint decisions with a partner or a friend, whoever you want to play it with. You can go in and kind of discuss those decisions and make them with somebody else. So if you are playing with somebody younger, which I will talk about in this review, you can kind of guide them and help, work through decisions together. It plays in 30 to 45 minutes. Designed by Jeffrey CCH, and the art is by Roxy Dye, and published by North Star Games. Somewhere far away, a mystery awaits. Deep in the forest, an innocent rabbit, Eila, leaves their home to embark on a life-changing adventure. Eila and Something Shiny is a 1+ player story-rich board game set in a mystical world. Take on the role of Eila as you solve puzzles, manage resources, and overcome challenges through underground perilous mazes, harsh snowy highlands, and more. Experience an exciting and emotional story told across 5 chapters featuring stunning art and illustrated comics. With branching story paths, your choices matter, affecting each chapter and deciding how the game ends. Good luck. Eila's fate is in your hands. This also comes with a note that says, please note, this story explores some mature themes such as loss that may be emotional for some children. And I will be touching on this note in a minute. So this was a review copy. Thank you to Ross and North Star for providing this. And I want to open this by saying I really love this system. And I think that the system that this was developed with has a fantastic way of taking you through a story. The choices that you make basically give you cards that you can add or take out of the deck that you're going to be going through, which you will be going through multiple times in each chapter. Basically, each time you go through the deck, it's a day, and that kind of decreases your timer until you get to 0, and then that day is over, and you can replay the scenario if you do happen to fail. And then the choices that you make directly impact that chapter, but it also impacts later chapters of the game, depending on which ending of each chapter that you get. So that is also important, keywords that you get, etc. I was captivated by the game, and I had intended on making this a, kind of side table experience that I was going to experience over a couple of weeks, take a couple of turns at a time. That turned into basically, instead of a couple of turns at a time, a whole chapter at a time, and then that turned into multiple chapters. I did wind up finishing the game in about a day and a half between doing some work at home and, basically taking breaks and with this. So really, it kept my interest very well. And I think one of the cool things was the main central mechanic. It's really revolving around resource management and conversion. So basically, you're going to be trying to get the correct resources through running through the deck. Certain cards are going to give you resources or allow you to trade resources for other resources. And you're trying to get that right combination to unlock certain new cards that are going to help you progress through the chapter. So I really thought that was very solid. The prompts are very solid, telling you what to do. From a symbology standpoint, it's very easy to figure out, okay, I need to add this card, I need to take this away, etc. Once you start going through, especially after that first chapter, it's so easy to figure out what you need to do. So each chapter also has different mechanics that branch off of the central mechanic, which was very welcome. So one of my examples to that is, in one chapter, you're trying to work your way out of a factory that's kind of in your way. One of the chapters is getting into a dungeon crawl. So all of these things introduce different mechanics that allow you to kind of vary the game up from chapter to chapter, and it keeps it interesting so that you don't feel like you're playing the exact same game over and over again. That's one thing that a system like this could potentially have. If you didn't have that varied mechanic that's in there, it could feel very samey, and this really doesn't. This is designed to be played through multiple times, probably 2 to 3. I'm a bit mixed on the ending that the majority of players are going to see their first time around. It does make sense after you get the best ending possible, but I'm really going to save that discussion for people who have played this game as well, just because it's a lot of spoilers and there's a lot of discussion that has to happen. There is some discussion on the BGG forums about this, and some alternate theories about what was going on, and again, I think that a game that generates this much discussion, at least it's very interesting, enough that people are putting their thoughts down in theories and such. So the art is fantastic, and it really does make sense in the context of the overall theme, but I did spend a while, especially in the middle and towards the end, thinking, why is this art so cutesy? When you have a game that has such a mature theme, it does eventually make sense. And, you do get to see, okay, this is why, at least in my opinion, it does make sense. So I do want to get back to that note, because that really was a big thing, and that's the source of a lot of discussion online, is that note of the mature themes and, for it being emotional to some children. I thought personally, when I came across the scene that happened right at the beginning of the game within the first chapter, I thought that was it. It would have qualified. I mean, I was feeling a little bit emotional about it, and, that would have been fine. Then it happened again in another scene during the later stages of the game, which I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it does hit you. It's a very emotional moment. Something even darker is coming. And, I think that's why some people have a problem with this disclaimer, is the fact that it says it may be emotional for some children. And I think it is emotional for a lot of people. I think that you should just take off for some children and replace it for some people, because it really does kind of sit with you and resonate with you once you get through the whole game and see exactly what's going on. It's pretty heavy. And, you do see some of the comments on BGG that are like, this was way heavier than I thought it was going to be. And fortunately, I had a little bit more of a, this will hit you kind of warning about it. So I do also struggle with the 8+ rating. I think that parents really do want to run through it first to see if it's appropriate, because it does deal with a very heavy theme. Again, especially at the end, it really does, kind of get dark. So that's what I would recommend. I mean, it is something that I did kind of struggle with a little bit and felt like you might want to beef that, note up a little bit, for people that are experiencing this in the future. When it came to color vision, I thought that everything was done really well. The resources had different shapes. The colors that needed to be separated, or the cards that needed to be separated, rather, did have colors that were easy enough to determine, okay, this is that. They're in groups. So you're very easily able to see that. I didn't personally have any issues. So I thought that was well done. And from a production standpoint, I mean, the insert made sense. Everything had a place, and you were easy. It made for some easy organization. So for my final thoughts, I would highly recommend this to people if you have the emotional fortitude to play through it. It does get dark. It does get very emotional. But the journey that this took me through, in my opinion, was definitely worth the time. And I think the beauty of this is there is a system now that has the ability to tell stories, and I'd love to see more stories told with the system because it just does such a good job. It's so well developed. You are able to add those special little, side games and stuff like that you're playing, much like this did. And I felt that this used really well to you are probably only going to play through this 2 or 3 times. So that is one thing that I have seen as kind of a complaint is, it's a $70 game. It is an experience. And what I would recommend is maybe having 2 or 3 people buy into this game and then pass it amongst yourselves, because it does make that cost of entry a little bit lighter. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I've already passed it off to a friend because I know the ending of it. I know what happens. I'm probably not going to sit down and play it again, but I do want other people to experience that. So I will be, passing this off and basically circulating it throughout, my friend group. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this out. If you do know somebody that has it, definitely borrow it, check it out. Otherwise, see if you can get a couple of people together and, get this into your hands. Again, as long as you're okay with the theme getting a little bit dark, because there is some loss that's involved. There are some things that are definitely on the darker side. So just note that going forward, but definitely recommend this as an experience. I thought that it was incredibly well designed and worth taking a look at. And that was Eila and Something Shiny. And let's talk about this other game that I wanted to talk about today, River Valley Glassworks. This is from 1 to 5 players in 25 to 45 minutes. Designed by Adam Hill, Ben Pinchback, and Matt Riddle. The art is by Andrew Bosley and published by Allplay. So welcome to River Valley. The beautiful pieces of glass that can be found along the river here have attracted the most entrepreneurial of woodland creatures to set up shop. In River Valley Glassworks, you will play as one of these pioneers drafting glass from the market of river tiles, and to do so, you have to play a piece from your inventory into the river. Now, each river tile can only take a specific shape, and you must play into a space adjacent to where you want to draft from. So after you pick up your glass, the river shifts forward, it reveals new pieces and new opportunities. You then store the glass that you pick up into your shop, and you do so strategically. And then depending on how the glass pieces are placed, your score will change drastically. You will get bonus points for filling in rows and columns, but don't draft too many of one type to avoid negative points. So thank you to Allplay for the review copy on this. I did initially play this on BGA before I got the review copy, and I will say that I wasn't really thrilled with it. We all just kind of walked away from the experience saying, it's okay. and we weren't really thrilled with going back to it, and we didn't really have any incentive. But I did receive a review copy of this at Gen Con, and I went back, I played the live version solo, I played it with multiple players, and my opinion on it definitely softens. I don't mind going back to BGA to play it now. I just really wouldn't recommend learning on there. And this is something that's kind of indicative of BGA games in general. I like it as a tool to check things out, but I do find that sometimes I miss rules on there. I've had conversations with multiple people that they have the same issue as well, that because everything is taken care of so well, you kind of miss some things. And I definitely found that with this. Like, everything was taken care of almost too well here. It's incredibly easy to teach live. You have a very simple turn structure. Either you're going to restock your inventory, or you are going to place one of the stones that you have onto, the river spaces. I think a couple of rounds of turns and everybody that I have taught was up and running. It is so incredibly simple to teach. But I really like the decision space here, and I've come to appreciate it over multiple games. This is a game that I have liked more and more every time that I've played it, because you have a few things to juggle. So the first one, every new color that you place in your shop has to start a new column, which is really critical to scoring at the end. You only score the 2 columns that you have the most of. Those bigger points are going to come from the later columns. So the columns that you start off with aren't going to have the high bonus points that the later columns do. The thing is the fact that, basically once you place a color, you have to continue building. You don't have the option of starting a new column with that same color. You have to build on top of that column. If there is a tie, in addition, you have to score the left-hand most highest column, which means that you get the lower amount of bonus points. So you really have to work on those later columns if you want the bonus points for them. So I found that was really interesting. I think the rarity comes into play here too, since each row only gets bonus points up to the first gap. You have to ask that question, do I play the most rare pieces in the front columns to maximize that column scoring later on, so that you can really build those later columns up with the less, since I'll have statistically better odds of pulling them later? Or do I load up those common pieces first so that I can really maximize row scoring, and I know that my rows are going to be filled up? So I found that was really cool and interesting, and it was a fun challenge to kind of figure out that. In addition, there's the overflow stones. So if you have no place to put your stones in your shop, and you have to build up columns of all the same color, so there will be a color potentially that you will not be able to put in your shop, and every single overflow stone that you take like that is a -3 points. So I might have to take some of those so that I get those stones that I really, really want. And this felt kind of similar to Azul. Do I take this piece and have a couple of overflows so I can finish out my row? Things like that, and I thought that was a really cool decision space. How do I best use my inventory to make sure that the stones I want are available later, so everything that you place is then out and available for other people to take, including yourself, as long as your opponents don't take it? So that was a lot of fun. And then also controlling the end game is potentially a viable strategy. You can rush the end game in this. It is a little bit difficult from my experience, because you do get multiple turns at the end potentially to, kind of finish things out and try to tie up those loose ends as best as you can. But if you have somebody that has something built up really early, they are just going to want to rush as much as possible to control that end game. So there's a lot going on here from a simple turn structure, which is one of the highlights of games that I've really been gravitating towards lately. And this really does give those Azul drafting vibes with some additional caveats and decision spaces. So I like that. We did repeatedly forget to move our character tracker forward for the amount of stones that we place, which does track the end game and shows you how close you are to that end game triggering. It's easy enough to resolve. If you forget, you just reset everything, you count everything up, and you just say, oh yeah, I placed this many stones. So that was good. Really solid production on this, especially on the deluxe version. It has clear acrylic river tiles, it has a neoprene playmat. So I thought that the production on it was really well done, and it even looked like the standard version was a very well done production too. With a caveat that I will talk about in just a second. And the art I did want to mention is just adorable. The characters are so well designed. My favorites are definitely Spring and Skip, although Otto Snugs is quite a close second. I know that Otto is usually the character that they use to promote this, but I've got a thing for frogs, so I love the character designs in this. It feels very very much in theme, and I thought that the theme was really well done and not so. The thing that I want to talk about is color vision, and we always talk about this on every game and every review that we do, and I did run into some major issues with this game. I think it was on a couple of different shades of blue that were very close to me. Unfortunately, the shape of the stones has an independent purpose from the color, so that normal double coating fix of the shape being an alternate indicator isn't possible. And there's a couple of like a yellowish and a goldish stone that are differentiated by glitter, but there's just a couple of them that I wasn't able to distinguish between. They were very close, and it did cause me some problems. So I know I'm going to try to figure out an alternative method to distinguish between those stones. This could potentially be a deal breaker to some, because I did have to ask multiple times to my opponents, what am I placing? Is this color? Is this that color? And it does kind of give away your strategy. Not that that's a huge issue, but it is just something to be aware of, that you may want to take a look at this before you purchase it if you do have color vision issues. That said, for my final thoughts, it's hard for me to go and say, go play this on BGA to see if you like it, because my initial opinion on it was so negative. That has definitely changed. I do really like it. I enjoy it enough to keep it around and try to figure out if a color vision fix is available. And I'll probably wind up taking this to OrcaCon with me and see. Brian Chandler and I are getting together. We're potentially putting together a kind of workshop where we're going to go and discuss these issues and start working on our own games and trying to fix them in real time. And this is definitely a candidate for that. So I would recommend trying a friend's copy before buying it to see if it's for you, especially if you have color vision issues. I would want you to see that. I don't always trust pictures anymore. I do want to see those stones in person to see, okay, am I going to be able to differentiate between these? Most of the colors are fine, but it's just a couple of colors I do have some nagging issues with, and that was definitely unfortunate. But again, if I'm willing to go and make a workaround for something, it's good enough to stick around, in my collection. So that's where I stand with it. So it's very solid abstract. I really enjoy it. I like teaching it, from the standpoint of it being very simple, and people have a lot of fun with it in general. The stones are very satisfying to play around with. Just that color vision issue, that's the one thing that I wish, I didn't necessarily have with it. But yeah, check it out. It is River Valley Glassworks. And stay tuned, because coming up next, we have an interview with Chris Westmus. On today's interview segment, we have Chris Westmoss, the designer of the upcoming Layers by KTBG, which coincidentally was our absolute favorite game at Origins this year. Chris, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Absolute pleasure to be here, and I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm excited. Thank you again.
Yeah, and we're so excited to have you. When I was talking with my fiance about
Yeah.
this interview, like she was so giddy, she was so happy. And like I was telling you before, we had the opportunity to chat with everybody listening. Layers was one of our favorite games this year at Origins, and we got a little preview of it. When my fiance is hooked on something, you have to take advantage of that. You have to
Yeah.
strike while the iron's hot, and the opportunity to talk to you about it, absolutely. Hands down,
Ah,
let's do this.
thank you. And I'm really, really happy you enjoyed it and that your fiance did as well. And please tell them thank you from me, from the bottom of my heart. That just makes me very happy. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you for that.
So can you explain a little bit about your history in gaming, how you got started in the hobby and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that?
No, of course. I suppose it's probably a familiar thing of just, growing up playing the old classics. For me, that was with my granddad. We played a lot of word games. We loved Boggle and Scrabble. Mastermind was a big one. I don't know if you remember that. It was kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
breaking the code as you go along. That was a big one. So, being with my granddad, playing games all the time, he was a very fun guy to be around. So, my love for it came at an early age. Then I guess progressing into games like Risk and Clue, a bit more of those kind of beefier games. But the one that really stood out was, I don't know if you remember Hero Quest is by
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure you do. Yeah. That
I have
was
a
like the
story.
yeah, Hero Quest was a big landmark. That was the first game I like fell in love with. You have all those wonderful miniatures. You got the board. You now all of a sudden you're playing with five of your friends. It was just such a good time, and I loved everything about that game. So that was yeah, that was the thing. And it's funny to think back actually remembering then because that was kind of like when I started to make obviously really bad games was you're a kid and I was a big Nintendo kid, so I would make these like roll and move games based off of Nintendo games I love, like Mega Man and Legend of Zelda and whatnot. So I definitely have fond memories of like having my mom or my friends try these games out, and they were I don't remember much about them other than they were impossible, but I thought that was a good thing. I thought like I've made a good game because you can't beat it. And yeah, I remember this. All I kind of remember is like you to beat the boss, you've got to like roll like three sixes in a row, kind of thing. It's like
Oh,
that, just
wow.
like it was those kind of things, right? So it's just like,
Wow.
oh, you couldn't do it, Charles. I'm sorry, buddy. That I just made a great game, but yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling, but
That's what we want.
yeah, that question definitely unlocked some funny memories, but Hero Quest, yeah, that was, quite a standout for me, for sure.
Yeah, so my Hero Quest story is when first started dating, my fiance wanted to impress me with a birthday present. And
Oh,
she was like, I'm going to make sure that this is really special and I'm really going to impress her.
yeah.
So this was 2018, and she went on eBay and got
Oh,
me the original Hero
oh,
Quest.
and impress you, they did. That is amazing. Yeah,
Yep,
and that's a
and
great gift.
oh, that was a fantastic gift. I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
And then they
"Will
announced
you
the
marry
the
me?" Like,
reprint,
right now?
like, 3 or
Yeah,
4 months later after that, but
right.
she's like, "Oh my god, I just got you this, and,
Mhm.
I feel terrible because now you can just get the reprint." I'm like, "I am keeping both."
Yeah. No, there's still something to be said about having the original. To be honest, I didn't get the reprint. I will. I
Mhm.
almost did right away, but I held off just for whatever reason. I can't hold off much longer. I'm gonna have to get it just to have that full circle moment of like I've got the original still intact and wonderful and hey, look, they've because the excitement was so high when I heard that they were reprinting it. And I was so worried that they might change this or that, or the art might not be good, but everything looked great. I was like, you guys did a great job. It's almost like you restored the original and just put a nice new sheen of lacquer over it. And that's how a reprint or remaster should be done. So I was really happy with that.
That's all that we need
Yeah,
out of that. We don't need a complete reimagining of the
ex
system.
exactly.
Clean things up. Go
They can
for it.
make another one, a sequel, or maybe make some expansions have that. I'm glad they kept the core intact. So, yeah, I am gonna have to get my hands on that for sure.
Have you ever seen, I think it's Bartrick broadcasts a video where
Oh.
he's talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
the best part of Hero
Yeah.
Quest?
Yes.
It's
I
so
have.
cool.
I remember that video, oh, man. My friend showed it to me a few years ago. I was, like, laughing so much because that game really was, and, Layers, just to move into that, I mean, so much of Layers was inspired by HeroQuest. Like, that was the first time I HeroQuest being first time I got to play as the villain, as the overseer. You're holding the secrets that your friends don't know. Like, what dangers they're gonna run into, and they don't yet. And that was so fascinating to me. Like, I dabbled with D&D when I was young, but we never really played it. It was too complex. I had a little book. I think it was my mom's. She had the monster manual or something. And I loved reading it just for the the words and how cool the pictures were and whatnot, but we never really played D&D much growing up. But HeroQuest was a thing because it was so tactile, it was a board game rather than
Hmm.
just pen and paper. The miniatures were so interesting, having those little furniture pieces. And yeah, maybe even just subconsciously when I was designing layers, that feeling of, hey, I get to be this secret villain who's creating this dungeon for you guys to adventure through. That definitely seeped into the design for sure.
I think it's kind of cool because you have that dynamic with both being that overseer and
Y-
getting to run through somebody
yes.
else's creation.
Yes. Well, that was the whole thing. It was like I see I'm having a great time, like, being the dungeon master, but my friends are having an equally great time not knowing what's going to happen and being surprised and confronting these dangers. So my whole thing is like, why not give an experience that lets you be both simultaneously? So in layers you can be both from turn to turn, and I think that's a good best of both worlds kind of approach.
I absolutely think
Yeah.
that myself. And could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on the history of the design? We have some of that background of the inspiration for you,
Yes.
but really kind of getting into that history and how the design of layers progressed.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually so I was making a giant I was making like a giant fantasy dungeon crawling game actually. So there's like an overworld map, there's all this and that. It was just a huge undertaking. I was buying miniatures, painting them with friends. It was just a whole never something that I would imagine I was going to sell or be a product. It was just for friends and for us to play. And in that game, there was a section of the game where if you're on the overworld map and you kind of go to a cave location, let's just say, then I would bring out this little subboard, which would be this coordinate grid, which would, become the basis of layers. So it was kind of like a section of a bigger game, and that ended up being when we were playing this larger game, that part of the game was more fun than everything else. And we just wanted to do that more. So I eventually just kind of plucked it from that big game and made it its own standalone entity. And I guess the genesis of that whole concept was I had bought these like little maps. So when people would move into a town or a dungeon or anything, I'd bring out this little map and then they'd start kind of moving their pieces around that. But the problem was that there's no like fog of war, so to speak. Like they'd kind of, you can see the map, you can see where you have to go. And so the element of surprise is kind of gone. Like I know I have to go this way because clearly that's where the exit is. So I was thinking, like, how can I simulate darkness? Like, how can I simulate you not knowing where to move next as if you are actually adventuring through it? So I guess born from that was that kind of coordinate moving system that the DM has to tell you what you've kind of come across. So it was a nice little happenstance that it worked out. And then again, that system was way better than the other games, so I just took it and made it its own game.
That's so cool to to hear that history behind how this developed. And,
Yeah.
one of the things in doing my research was that I saw you actually did a crowdfunding campaign on a version called Layer in
Yes.
2016. So, can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that was fun. Everyone that was playing it, and myself included, we enjoyed playing this game. They're like, "You should do something with this." And actually, so Hasbro at the time was running a competition, just trying to find the a next great game for them. So they were taking submissions. I think it was just a rule book. Just send the rule book in, and from there, I did that. I sent in the rule book. They liked it, so I made it to, like, I guess air quotes, the next round, and then I had to send in a prototype, which I then did using the Game Crafter, which I will shout out is an excellent tool for any designer out there, as you probably know of.
Hmm.
Yeah, great for self-publishing just to get your ideas across. So yeah, I sent that out to them, and long story short, I was one of 5 that was then chosen to be part of this big crowdfunding campaign, and the winner was to receive a, I guess, your game would be published by Hasbro. So I was like, "Man, this is crazy." So that experience was very fun and my first foray into crowdfunding, and I had a great time with it, especially trying to create fun stretch goals and things like that. Like, I was making a graphic novel to go along with the narrative, and all these kind of things that you could get a miniature and your likeness made, that kind of fun stuff. So I got a good taste for crowdfunding. I also learned the logistics and troubles of production, and you have to follow through with this stuff. And yeah, like shipping nightmares and things of that nature. So it was a big learning experience for sure. And it makes me appreciate and admire all of these big campaigns that have come since, because now I know how much work goes into them. So yeah, I learned a lot there for sure.
Do you have any like big takeaways that you gleaned from that that you want to share with maybe some aspiring publishers?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, just to be bluntly, try not to get in over your head, as exciting as it may be for stretch goals and extra add-ons and this and that. Just be very, I guess, present and understanding of, try to visualize the end and how much it will take to get that done. And be aware that there are going to be a lot of delays, hurdles, and whatnot. So being communicative with your audience is huge. As long as you are updating them as much as possible, they'll be pretty lenient with you. There's always going to be a few that are kind of frustrated by delays, and they're inevitable. But yeah, just stay on top of the game, be very genuine. You know, people are happy to support. So you don't need
Mhm.
to try to oversell or be inauthentic. You want to use your real voice as much as possible. Those are kind of things I learned.
And it's really interesting that you say that because I had a designer who's relatively new kind of come to me for advice and support and that. And I said, go and listen to my back catalog except for episode one. Don't do that. Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Um, But I said there's so much advice that some great designers have, basically laid on my audience
Mhm.
over the years I've been doing this. And I think one of the big things is communication. It
Yeah.
comes up again and again. And the thing that I
Huge.
told them was, you have to communicate with your backers and supporters and
Yes.
say this is what's going on, because nothing's more frustrating than when you have a break in that chain of communication.
Yes.
As long as you keep that up, I think
Yeah.
people are fairly supportive, except
Yeah.
for,
People
like you
are
said, the couple exceptions.
right. But no, I agree. People are generally kind and understanding, and especially when it's a big production, they know these things are going to happen, and you've already been very forward and upfront about it. As you should be, you should mention that these things can happen, but we promise fulfillment. And if you can kind of put that up front, then people will be very forgiving. And just as long as you are honest with everything, just be yourself, be kind, they will reciprocate.
So we had this crowdfunding campaign in 2016, and
Yeah.
I kind of want to bridge that gap between then and now.
Whew. Yes.
So how did you get connected with KTBG? Because I think that that's a really fascinating story.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, the campaign ended, things were great, it raised a very wonderful amount and did well. Outreach was more than I could have imagined, so I was very happy with how the campaign ran. It's very successful in my opinion. And then I kind of just being, new to the whole world of like self-publishing or things of that nature. I mean, I had made a lot of games, but never really thought of trying to sell them, so to speak. So I didn't really know where to go after that. I was like, okay, I guess that's just it. Like a few people have my game now. That's great. It's not as the production wouldn't be as grand as I wanted, but at least I got it out there. I was content. Time passed and I would see the game and play. I was like, this could still be more. Like, this has another lifespan waiting for it. I should try to get it out there, but this time go with a publisher. Like, go with someone that's reputable, has some experience, and see where this can really go. So there was a dormant period of inactivity there where I kind of sat around and I was doing other things, working on other games until I decide, yeah, let me dust this off and try to see if people are still interested. And just by coincidence, I was on Facebook and it might have been an Eric Lang thread on his Facebook. He had posted something, people were responding, designers and fans alike. And Helena of KTBG had messaged, and she had somewhere in her response mentioned that she was a publisher out of Toronto. And so I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, I'm in Toronto. So like we've got something in common. I'm kind of looking for a publisher. She's in Toronto, I'm in Toronto. I did a little research on KTPG and they looked great. I loved just their vibrancy and how they presented themselves. It looked fantastic. So I was like, I should just reach out. And I know sometimes cold messages aren't the best way to go, but I did it. I messaged her and I just said, "Hey, I'm a designer from Toronto. I've got maybe a game you might be interested in." And she was exceptionally kind and was completely warm and inviting. It's like, "Oh, that's great. Thank you for reaching out." Yeah, shoot me a like an what's the term for it? Just like an ad kind of thing. Like a sell sheet, I guess is the term I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I whipped one up. I sent it to her and she, I guess liked it enough to say, "Okay, next up let me try a prototype. Can you give me one?" I was working at Casa Loma. She subsequently lives in the area, so she just zipped by one day while I was at work. I dropped the prototype in her hands, and a few days later, she messaged me with great news saying they loved the game after playing it and would love to partner up. So that was how I met Josh, Sean, and Helena, and it was great.
It's so wild how that just happened kind of organically within the
Yeah,
community, and that's what I love. Love
yeah,
those organic connections.
super organic, and like it just, I guess, reasserted my love of the community, just how inviting and welcoming people are. That's the experience I've always had. So it was nice to see that really come through, especially when I guess I needed it. So yeah, it was great. And just to quickly expand on that, Helena and Josh and Sean also being local, I was able to, you know, become friends with them, go to their house and have meetings. And it was so much nicer than perhaps if it all had to be remotely. We may not have had that camaraderie and who knows what might have happened. So I think the localness really helped as well.
And I think there is something to that in-person chat as opposed to doing something remotely, right?
Yeah.
There's that, like you said, it's more warm. I think it's just more organic, it's more free-flowing. You're able to kind of interpret body language a little bit
Yes.
better as well.
Exactly that. Like, you just get a feel for someone's mannerisms and the body language and the warmth. Yeah, it comes through. So, yeah, I was really lucky and honored to meet them and can call them friends, at the end of the day. So that's really nice.
Great folks. I
Yeah,
absolutely love working with them, and,
yeah.
it's always a joy to see them at conventions. And speaking of which, do you attend any while you're up in, Canada?
Yeah, yeah, the name now escaping me might be just because of my scatterbrained memory. We kind of tested an iteration of Lairs at a convention, and I got to be there, and it was right quite nice and very telling. It's again, as you know, the nature of playtesting. It's so important, and especially just being able to observe. It's one thing to get the feedback from the players at the end, but to also just see where they might be struggling with something that they may not even know they are, but you're catching it. Yeah, it's like invaluable information. So I was really happy to be at that convention with them, and I'm hoping more to come.
I always thought conventions were really interesting because I have a different perspective on it
Hmm.
from the media side of things and
Oh,
from,
yes.
what an attendee would have.
Yep.
And then also from what a designer has, because I always thought, well, the designers, should be at the booths and everything. And it's like, that is the perfect opportunity
Hmm.
to get repetitions in for your next project, to
Totally.
have that hands-on experience. So that is like the most valuable thing that you can be doing there. So
1000%. Yeah. And the networking aspect, like I got to meet some cool people and see great games. Like I was also there as a fan. Like I love seeing these other games being play tested, and getting to chat with them as an attendee, so to speak. So it was kind of nice. I just like being in that environment. I want to be in it more, to be honest. Like I love conventions. They're so fun. I guess maybe tougher for the organizers, but as someone who can just waltz on in and have fun and leave, that's great. Yeah.
it's like I don't have to do any of the work behind
Yeah.
this. I do a little prep
I
work
can
and
just
then I'm
play
done.
board
It's great.
games, you mean? And that's amazing. Yeah.
I am looking forward to OrcaCon, which is one of the next conventions I'm going to. I'm going to PAX Unplugged
Oh, lovely.
in December, which is going to be great.
Yeah.
One of my favorite conventions. But OrcaCon, I'm actually going to get to go. And after I'm done with my panels and shows,
Yeah.
um, I will actually be able to just play games, which is incredible. Like,
Yes.
that doesn't exist for me at a convention anymore. So I'm
Yeah,
super
you must be
excited.
busy. Yeah.
Super excited for that.
Yeah,
So.
that's fun.
So, if you had any part of the game that you would say that you're most excited for people to see, what would that be?
Yeah, I guess I would want people to experience the map making part of the game. And I love that that's the first thing you do in the game because it really sets a nice creative tone for what's to follow. And it's just so much fun. So like you're choosing where these walls go, where you're hiding this slime, where this trap is going to go, and you're chuckling to yourself because you're imagining your opponent stumbling into this stuff. So I'm excited for people to have fun making these dungeons and these maps, and it's going to be different every time, which I like to boast about. That's just such a fun thing. It's always going to change. So I'm looking forward to that. And there's gonna be monster meeples, so those are cute. I'm
Oh
looking
yeah.
forward to people seeing those. But yeah, just the creativity that'll come out of the dungeon design is a part of it that I'm looking forward to people seeing and reacting to and getting feedback on.
And I think that's one of the things that really stood out most to me is, Sean was there explaining the game to the two of us
Yeah,
and he says, "Here's your pieces.
yeah.
Here are like four rules that you
Mhm,
have to know.
mhm.
Build a dungeon."
Yeah, yeah. And I think because we're trying to strike the balance of, simplicity and, depth, that like keeping gameplay restrictions to a minimum was a crucial creed going into it. Like we just want people to jump in and be able to start building a dungeon. Here's your pieces, start putting them down. There's a rule or two,
Mhm.
just to avoid it being broken, but those rules are very easy to follow and they still provide tons of flexibility. So As you know, KTBG is, they're appealing to both adults and younger audiences. So
Yep.
it's that's amazing because the appeal is so broad, but it's tricky sometimes because you want to appease both and find that perfect middle road of like what's going to be accessible enough for a younger player to grasp, but not so shallow that an adult is going to lose interest. And I think we've found that middle road, and I'm happy with that.
And there's also that expandability too, where this starts off with a very, very simple rule set. And then as you progress, you
Yes.
start to unlock things and you
Yes.
start to get those small rules introduced to you gradually as opposed to just a giant dump.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I'm excited about that a lot actually because the very base of the game is very simple. But as you just mentioned, new rules and concepts are slowly trickled in, they're drip feeded into the system. So that way you're not overwhelmed at the start, but you do know that there is complexity ahead. And at any time, you can always strip anything you want away and have that very core, simple base foundation should you want it. But you are going to want to open those tuck boxes because opening new packages is exciting.
It's just fun.
Yeah, who doesn't want to open a tuck box and see like a fun monster meeple fall out and some new little actions you can do? So that's exciting. And again, it expands on the game within the game. So yeah, that's a really neat notion that I actually credit Sean for. That was a genius move on his part, and it really added a lot to the game.
Yeah, I absolutely love that part and
Yeah,
really looking forward to that.
yeah. I'm glad you say that.
Any
Mhm.
other projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I always have a lot kind of on the go, like at least 6, 7 kind of things. I hit creative blocks a lot. It's nice to have so many I can switch gears and get my mind off that. There was a point where I would just fixate on a problem and I would never get a solution because you have to step away. You
Mhm.
have to. And then you come back with fresh eyes and right away you've seen the solution. It's amazing how fast it hits you once you've dislocated yourself from the problem. So, anyway, sorry to get back. A lot on the go. One I'm really excited about. It's kind of like a laser tag theme. So yeah,
Oh,
I was a huge laser tag fan growing up, and combining that with a bit of like an old 70s, 80s anime flair. So you've got a nice little narrative story. It's like a laser academy kind of thing happening. Some vibrant artwork, some fun characters. Yeah, and
I
some
like that a
unique.
lot.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be very fun, and so far is very fun. Unique hidden movement mechanics. So, again, I guess I love that element of surprise as you're going. It's gonna really simulate moving through again, I guess another correlation there of, like, mazes and suspense
Mhm.
that Layers has. It's very different, but I didn't realize how much I love mazes, but there we go. So yeah, laser tag. A couple other things. Yeah, I've got a little like pro wrestling card game that's fun. I'm moonlighting currently as a commentator for an independent pro wrestling promotion in Toronto. Uh,
Really?
yeah, my friend is a wrestler, and I used to watch growing up, loved it.
Mhm.
He was like Bret Hart fan and whatnot.
Oh,
So
damn.
I know, yeah, I know all the terms and whatnot. So he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, like, you want to do like we're looking for a commentary team. You want to do commentary?" I was like, Sure." Like, I'm super shy, but the good thing is with commentary is I'm not in the ring going. I'm not an announcer. I'm just sitting at a desk nearby, kind of commentating to live stream. So if anyone's interested in that, check out Super Kicked. They are an amazing promotion in Toronto. And it inspired me to dig up some old wrestling videos I used to like and start making I want to make a game on pro wrestling. So I've got a little card game in the works there. Yeah, cave survival horror game. I'm a big horror fan. So always like that kind of stuff. I've got a narrative adventure kind of based in a papercraft aesthetic kingdom. So
Oh,
that's going to
cute.
be yeah, yeah. I love so if you might know the game Sea Salt and Paper with their origami artwork and whatnot.
Yep.
But yeah, this is gonna be like pure fantasy and everything's made out of paper craft and it just ooh, the art's be so nice. Right now, just all reference stuff, but that's kind of in the style of like an Escape the Dark Castle kind of thing. So
Mhm.
very card driven, scenario based. Yeah, things of that. Lots on the go.
In the hopper.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think
that'll be fun.
I think that is a really good thing and more good advice, and one thing that I actually just recently talked about with one of my friends, and he was just fixated on one thing, and he's like, "I can't,
Yeah.
get over this." I'm like,
Oh,
"Just
that was me.
figure out another project." And
Yes.
he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Figure out another project. Just
Great advice to
go
you.
and figure out something else because it's
Yeah.
going to get your mind off of this, and then you're going to be working on that. You might hit a stumbling block, and then you can come back to this and then try to figure
Ex-
out, oh yeah, oh okay. Or
yeah.
if you're working on something else and then you see a solution that works for that, sometimes it can even work for what you're
That's
working on there.
exactly it. That's happened before too. Like you'll come across a solution as part of just something that happened naturally in another game you're working on. Like, oh my, I could just apply that here and it's fixed. And you
It's
just have that
wild.
hallelujah moment. And yeah, I never used to be able to kind of multitask projects that well. I would love to just try to get one thing done, but man, that's not the way to go. Have a bunch on the go, chip away if you have to. Some things are easier than others, and you'll be able to just run through them fast. Others take time,
Hmm.
and that's okay. I've had some designs sitting here for like 5 years. There's an abstract game, tentatively called Medusa, and it's like I'm not gonna throw chess around because that's just such an obvious abstract uh, game, but it has really nothing to do with chess. But there are units, and it's on a hexagonal board, and that kind of thing. Each unit's got can do different things, whatnot. It operates like an abstract game
Hmm.
with a bit of a theme to it. But again, it's moving at a snail's pace, but I've become okay with that because each time I do come back to it, I improve it, and I know at some point it's going to be done, and that's fine, as long as I keep chipping away.
So you did mention wrestling already, and I do want to dive into that a little bit, but we're going to talk about your hobbies outside of gaming.
Absolutely.
Um, do you have a favorite wrestler, or do you watch the current product that's out there?
So I got back into it because I started working for the promotion here in Toronto.
Hmm.
And I don't watch the wrestling, but I keep track of it peripherally now. So I know what's going on. I know the storylines. I know who the champ is. I'll watch. Actually, I lied. I watch the highlights. Like I'll see like on YouTube, like
Hmm.
just little clippets or things of that nature. There are a couple wrestlers that I will go out of my way to see a certain match if it's appealing to me.
Hmm.
Like Will Ospreay is someone that I think is just fantastic.
Yep.
He's clearly in his prime. He's doing crazy things, coming into his own. Put on a bit of weight, looking like a main eventer. That's kind of cool. Cody Rhodes, I think is it's great to have that baby face again.
Mm.
That I feel we haven't seen as authentic since like Bret Hart. Like you had your John Cena, but it was just so watered down, so PG that it came off as very, it's just too gimmicky, too colorful. It kind of lost the realism for me.
Hmm.
Cody being that, that generational wrestler that he is, I love that you now have a good guy again to cheer for that you can actually feel honesty from. That's cool to me. I like that. We're kind of moving past the era of everyone's a bad guy, just who's the least bad.
Exactly.
There's good guys and bad guys again, and I think it's time for that, which is great. So yeah, I am kind of keeping track peripherally for sure. If even just because it helps me with my commentary for what I do with Superkicked. I want to stay up on the moves and the terms and what's going on. And so I had to re-immerse myself in the world of pro wrestling, and it's been fun.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I really like with Cody, not to get off on a tangent, but
Yeah,
the fact that he was in WWE
yeah,
and then struck out on his own and said, "You know what? I'm gonna go. I'm going to improve my craft and
Yes.
travel the world and go and
He
wrestle in other companies, make my own company.
Oh man, he earned his stripes. Like he did
Yeah.
the thing. He was like, you know what? I'm not just gonna be. Clearly, I'm not just gonna be given everything. I've. This isn't my place. I'm gonna go off. I'm not liking my direction here, my creative direction. Go off, do my own thing. I
Yep.
don't have to be in this big platform just because they're huge. I'm not happy here. He went off, did his own thing, started his own company with a few of his friends, made a name for himself, and then came back when he felt the time was right. And sure, he might start. I don't know if, just again, the pro wrestling speak, I don't know if they're currently using him properly in this reign. It's tough
Hmm.
because your reign is dependent. Like everyone needs a rival. His rival right now is a little cloudy. He doesn't have that clear cut villain in his story.
Yeah.
He needs that. He needs is a Gordon to give
Hmm.
an RKO out of nowhere and build that up. When that hits, that's gonna that's gonna hit hard. But yeah, it's tough. He might be playing a little bit of second fiddle right now to Roman. We'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
But
Hopefully well.
yeah, let's hope. But
Any other hobbies outside of wrestling?
yeah, absolutely. I love music in all forms and capacity. I play music, love guitaring. Used to play in a band when I was younger. Didn't for a long time. Just do a lot of bedroom studio stuff. Make a lot of like ambient instrumental stuff these days. A lot of delay, reverb, spacey cinematic stuff. But recently started playing with some friends just for fun, doing some cover songs, and maybe we'll play live in the new year. Hit up some dive bars and maybe travel outside of Toronto to cut our teeth in some of the places where no one knows us first. Like,
Yeah.
get out to like Burlington and just play some random place. But yeah,
As,
music's a big one.
as long as you're not going to Hamilton. The, I've heard some things.
Yeah, make a stop in Hamilton. We're gonna right the ship in Hamilton. But yeah, music definitely is a big passion of mine. I'm a collector. I'm a huge nerd, so I collect like vinyl. I was a comic guy growing up. I don't collect comics these days, but I that's not the truth. I collect like old, like pulpy horror comics if I see them, old magazines. I love film. I dabbled with filming, but I don't anymore. Like I've made some really bad like horror movies at cottages and stuff like that. Love video editing, but I've got a projector that I love and I will tell everyone about because projectors are amazing.
Hmm.
So I can just have a little theater in my living room. I love watching movies. I don't know if that constitutes a hobby, but I mean, it's
I
something I
think
sure
so.
like to do.
It's something that you like to do and you look forward to. So for me,
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, gaming. With video games, I grew up playing a ton of them.
mhm.
I don't as much anymore. I play, not to come off as like artsy man 5000, but I love like the indie games, like games like Limbo or Inside or Journey and things of that nature. Like those, when things like that come out, I'll play. And also because I like shorter games. I don't have the time nor attention to pump into like a 60-hour game these
Yeah.
days. So I like games that I can in 2 hours, 3 hours, chip away an hour at a time, done. Tells a great story. Like Little Nightmares. That's a great game. You
Mhm.
just 3 hours worth of puzzles. I'm in. So I still love gaming. I just don't that much anymore. But when the right game comes around, I'm all in. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Do you have anything on your board game table other than your designs?
Oh, yes, I do. What have I been playing lately? So we played Tokyo Highway recently. Fun as
Mhm.
always. Yeah, I love that. It's the minimalistic aesthetic combined with the Jenga ishness. Great, great game. Yeah, what else have I got going on? Mansions of Madness played recently.
Classic.
Yeah, Tobago, that was fun. Sky Team, I love Sky Team. I think that's
It's
just
really good.
yeah, that's like, oh my gosh, these genius design. Like I love cooperative games. I still think there's not enough. Like I want to start designing more. Like cooperative games are great because you know com- Competition's fun, but like, man, working together to solve something is like so rewarding, and you're just like high fiving all around. So Sky Team's a big win. Recently had a huge game of Onk, which
Mhm.
was great. The first game I had of that did not go well, but it was because of the players involved. There
Oh,
was one, and not to give him a bad rap, but he was a bit of a bad seed at the time. He kind of brought the mood down. Something happened there. And every other time I played has been just like a home run. So my hat's off to Eric Lang for Onk, because first off, it's gorgeous to look at. I love the Egyptian culture, so it was an immediate buy for me. And yeah, another example of like simplicity, elegance, and complexity somehow. It's like, man, this game is so easy to learn and play, but the decision space is excellent. So yeah, that hit the table. And Mission Red Planet I played recently, which is one of my favorites.
still haven't played that yet.
Oh, you need to play that.
I've heard mixed about it, like, there's some
Okay.
people that absolutely just don't like it, and
Hmm.
then the people that like it love it.
Yeah. I'm on the love side for sure. It's always been very fun. Higher player counts, it gets chaotic, but you know what you're getting into. And just when you kind of like undo the seatbelt, so to speak, and just have, you're in for a fun ride, like it's great. If you wanted something that's crunchy and you're in control of all the time, especially with higher player counts, maybe that might be why you won't gravitate to it, so to speak. But
Mhm.
I find it an amazing synergy of mechanics. Like you've got like if you remember Citadel's that whole like kind of like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
who's number one? Okay, you go first. Number two. It's like that. You have that mechanic happening. But then you have area control, and then you've also got like I don't know, there's so much going on. Secret objectives. It's amazing. The steampunk art, I think it's great.
See, now I have to track down a copy and play it.
Yes, please do. Play with like 4 people at
Okay.
first. Yeah.
Alright. Me or for, like,
I would say
aside from
4
me?
including you to
Okay.
start.
Well,
But
awesome. And how can people get a hold of you on your socials if they want to see what you're doing?
yeah, please. I will disclaimer, I need to be more active on my socials and update my Instagram. But please add me, send me a message, please, at Chris Westmas. So basically my name, but just Chris Westmas on Instagram. That's same on Facebook. I do have a Twitter or X account. I don't use it, but I will if people want to talk. Like I'm always down.
Just stick to Facebook and
Yeah,
Instagram.
yeah.
You don't want any part of that anymore. It's
Yeah,
just
I never
not.
really was a Twitter person, like, it was fine, but I never really used it, and then it just, started
Yeah.
becoming a reflection of ugly society, so it's like, "Wow."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not great these days.
No.
Not at all.
I respect if, a business owner people need it as a tool,
Yep.
absolutely, but
Yep.
yeah. What have you been playing recently? I always look for any recommendations because I love just picking up games and
Let's see. So, interestingly enough, Endeavor Deep Sea has
Oh,
been a huge hit for me. I
yeah.
mean, I've been absolutely adoring that game.
Oh,
Um,
Josh will love to hear that. That's great. He's gonna make him
um,
very happy to hear, and
I
that's
love
been
it.
getting a lot of praise. I'm so, like, proud of them for that. That's amazing.
Well, and I think from so many levels, right? Because you have, and I did mention this when I talked about it, but it's very much like you have the level of it just being a great game in
Mhm.
general.
Mhm.
But the fact that they took something that was about colonization and oppression and they
Yes.
made it something positive in the theme.
Yes.
Um, and then on
That's
top
tough to
of
do.
it really is.
Uh,
And the way that they handled that was so good.
yeah.
In addition to the fact that from an environmental standpoint, you had the insert, which was not plastic.
Oh, yeah.
You had everything that was wrapped in paper so that
Yeah.
everything was done in an environmentally conscious
Oh,
mindset.
Helena is very intentional with everything she does, and I that's, like, one of her greatest qualities. She's, like, so I don't know, she's finger on the pulse, She's
Mhm.
very environmentally conscious, very just socially conscious, like, a great person to talk to for that reason, and it shows in her products because it comes across like everything has been thought of, and they're not, you know we know what we have here in Mother Earth, and we will
Mhm.
not take it for granted. Like these resources are finite, so let's be good to her.
I I am so very glad that people are, starting to see that and being
Yeah.
conscious of it. The other game that I have been playing a ton of, and we'll be producing a video very shortly. I keep saying that over and over again, but it takes time to do this.
Eh,
Is the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era? It's a
oh,
chip theory game.
whoa.
What you talked about games that you don't have time for a 60-hour game.
Yeah, that's one of them.
This
Yeah.
is this is one of them.
Yeah. But things like Elder Scrolls, those are level apart. Like, okay, we can make time for that.
They're so
That's just like
good.
exceptional
It's
for
just so
sure.
good.
I watched my friend play Skyrim. I didn't even need to play. I just like and The Last of Us were two
Mhm.
games I didn't even play. I just watched my friends play, and it's just like so interesting. I can't believe the amount of lore that Elder Scrolls has.
It's
It's like,
wild.
man.
It's wild. And
Yeah.
just to see in this game the amount of care and detail that went into it, like, there's
Mhm.
little lore for every town. There's
Yeah.
little missions for each of the guilds that you get to learn about, and little side quests that you get to go on, and
Yeah.
depending on what you do, that has an effect later in the game.
Totally.
It's
Like, did you guys actually go there? Like, does this place exist? Like, how do you know
right,
so much about it?
right.
Yeah.
Um, but that was 4-year in development game,
Mm,
and it shows. I mean, it's
right.
very apparent that there's a lot of care and effort and work
Yeah.
put into it just because of the enormity of the game,
Yes.
and it's a fantastic game.
That's good to know. I will actually jot that down, to be honest.
That's if you're looking for something fun, because that's just good old-fashioned dice rolling and, press your
Spots?
luck. Yeah,
Okay.
great little game.
I love press your luck and dice rolling, so yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
it's so cute. You know, basically all the cards are Dalmatians, and you get to place dice on them, and they're basically matching the pips on the dice with their little
Ah!
spots. It's so cute.
Yeah, it's adorable.
It's a lovely little game, super easy to teach. Lovely what you can do with the actions, which you basically take certain actions and mix them
Yeah.
in with a bunch of optional ones. So the
Okay.
game's different every single time in what you
Love
can do.
that. Huh.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
genius little
very
game.
cool, very cool. Okay.
So awesome. Well, Chris, this has been so fantastic chatting with you.
Yeah, you as
Um,
well.
looking forward to seeing more of you. I need to see this laser tag game. I'm
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
super stoked about that.
Yeah, I wanna tell you more for sure as soon as I keep, plugging away at it, and definitely gonna give you some details on that because 'cause I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm all in on that.
Yeah,
So Layers is coming up on crowdfunding, and look out for that.
yeah.
Again, it's my favorite game at Origins. It's
Ah, thank
probably
you.
going to be one of my most anticipated games for next year. So
Oh,
really
that's great.
looking forward to that. Looking forward to the crowdfunding campaign, and looking forward to seeing this out in the wild.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm smiling from ear to ear, like, it's very nice of you to say it. I'm flattered and happy and, like, all the things right now, so I
Awesome.
appreciate that.
Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for chatting.
Absolutely.
And I think that'll do it for us today. I want to thank all of you for listening. If you do want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can always check out that website. The Instagram is at cardboard_time. Blue Sky is at cardboard time. It's so good to see more of y'all over on Blue Sky. I've been enjoying my experience over there, and I'm glad that more people are heading over there from Twitter because it was just a toxic place I couldn't take anymore. The Discord is on the Tabletop Express server. You can always email me for an invite or head on to the website, and there is a link there. And if you do want to contact me through email with any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, you can hit that email up at cardboardtime@gmail.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table in 2 weeks for episode 99 of Cardboard Time.